you know, when I asked you how they got involved in sports psychology, um, was there a time in your childhood or high school uh, where you made the decision to get into psychology eventually? And how did it
No,
all start?
no. I don't think as a child I had any idea what psychology was. Certainly not sports psychology. I played a lot of sports growing up, and I went to McGill. I had played a lot of football. I was fortunate we won the city championship in junior high and in senior high. And I actually was a city all-star in football, which was cool. Then I went to McGill and I thought I might go in the direction of medicine, but I didn't like the hard sciences and I found psychology and I really liked it. And I continued to play football at McGill. We won the national championship. And then I went to graduate school. I went to Dalhousie. I did a master's in psychology, which was pretty general psychology. It wasn't clinical per se. And then I came out and I wanted some clinical experience. So I worked for a couple of years in a mental hospital in Quebec. I had a lot of experience. I remember saying to one of the psychiatrists that I wondered if I could sit in on one of his groups. And he said to me, "Sit in, I'll give you a group." And he gave me a group, and I didn't have much experience at all. And it was in the locked ward where two of the guys in the group had killed people. So it was kind of exciting. I was in pretty good shape, so I figured I could handle myself. Anyway, I went back to school. I went to the University of Maryland to get a PhD, but the American program is very rigid, and I'd already had a couple of years of experience. So I transferred to the Institute of Psychiatry at the University of London in England, where they let you shape your own program much more. And did a PhD there and in clinical psychology, and found it really interesting. Did a lot of work. My PhD dissertation was on the role of suggestion in psychotherapy, the importance of what we think and what we believe. And I'd had enough schooling. My wife and I, we bought a VW van and we drove to India from England. We were on the road for almost 2 years. I taught in Greece, I taught in Iran, came back, got a job at Mississippi State. Actually, I taught in England too. Got a job at Mississippi State, and I was teaching psychology, and I was clinical director of the counseling center. And it was there that the tennis coach, a fellow named Jim Poling, came in and asked me if I would work with the tennis team. And Jim was formerly in the military in the U.S. Army, and they had done a fair bit of mind control with some of the soldiers. And he was really impressed with the results, and he was asking if I could work with his team. And I did, and we had some really good results. And then it became the golf team, and then it became the baseball team. And again, we were just getting great results. One of the kids on the baseball team, Mississippi State, was always top 20 in the nation in baseball. One of the kids tied the NCAA record for most home runs in a single season, had a huge performance jump. And in Mississippi, college sports is really big. There's not pro sports at the highest level. And so Davy Johnson was the manager of the Jackson Mets AA team, and he was interested in what I was doing with this kid to increase his home run production. And so he had me come down to Jackson, and we had a conversation. And he was very impressed. Really smart guy, always innovative. And so he hooked me up with the player development guy for the New York Mets, and I met with him. And he said, "You've had a lot of success working with collegiate baseball," because we had a number of things that worked out really well. And he said, "But have you ever worked with the pro players?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, it's completely different." He kind of blew me off. And it's not different at all. It's very much the same, except that egos get bigger as you go up the ladder. And so I went back My wife didn't like Mississippi much. We moved back to Vancouver, and I started working with the AAA Baseball Canadians. Actually, this may be more information than you want, but I approached the Baseball Canadians. We're the Milwaukee Brewers AAA team, and it was during the Major League strike. And the way it works in minor baseball is like the Vancouver Canadians own the bats and the balls and the seats, but they don't own the players. That's the Brewers. So they had to wait for the Brewers assistant general manager to come down before they could give me permission to work with the players. And when he came down and we met, he said, "You know, what you've done in college is impressive, but you don't expect to get paid to work with these guys, do you?" And I said, "Well, you know, if you work with the doctor, you got to pay something." So he said, "If I go to Bud Selig, who was a GM with the Brewers at that time, later became the commissioner of baseball, he said, if I go to Bud Selig and ask him for money for a psychologist for our minor league program, he's going to tell me to go see a psychologist." So I said, "You know what? Just give me the guys." And so he gave me 4 or 5 guys to work with. Kevin Bass was one of them, who went on to have a great career in the major leagues. And I worked with them. And then I also worked with the BC Lions. And then it spread out to the Vancouver Canucks. And this was in the early 80s. And the Canucks, when I started with the Canucks that year, they had won, I think it was 3 or 4 games in their last 20. They were really struggling. Harry Neal was coaching. And I must have called Harry about 8 times, and he never, I'd leave a message, he'd never pick up. Finally, one time when I called, he picked up the phone. I guess he was expecting somebody else to call. And he said, "Who's this?" And I said, "Saul Miller." He said, "You know, you are really persistent." And he said it like, "You're a pain in the butt." And I said, "Harry, you'd expect your players to be persistent, wouldn't you?" And he started laughing. He said, "Okay, okay, what is it you want?" And I said, "I want to talk to you about how I might be able to help the team." So we had a meeting. I went up to his office and we had a meeting, and they gave me about 6 or 7 players to work with. Um, some really good guys. I mean, this goes way back. Glenn Hanlon was the goalie, Tiger Williams, Darcy Rhoda, all these guys. Anyway, the bottom line is, not because of me, but the team went on to the Stanley Cup Finals, 81, 82, and lost 4 straight to a very good Islanders team. But it just kept expanding, I was always ready to go anywhere at any time to work with people. And something you said earlier, I think is really important, and that is you have to keep it simple. If you're making it complicated, it's not going to work. There are 2 parts to being effective at what I do. One part is having a technology that works, and the other is being able to sell it to the people, being able to frame it in a way that they engage with it, that they are attracted to it, and they can use it. And that's always been, I mean, I think people say, I've written 10 books, and people say, "Well, the thing about your books is that it's pretty easy to understand." And it should be. It should be easy to understand. I worked at one time when I was in graduate school for this Hungarian psychiatrist, and I was like writing his research papers. And he said to me, um, I wrote this paper, and he handed it back to me. He said, "I used to work with this man who said he gave famous researcher. He gave every paper to his mother to read, and if she couldn't understand it, it was too complicated." He said, "Write it more simply." And there's wisdom in that. I mean, it's being able to express these ideas clearly enough and simply enough that people can say, "Yeah, I can do that," and they try and do it, and they do it.
Saul, my late wife always used to tell me, um, it's common sense.
Yeah,
And she's right. Um, and it's common sense, but it's not common. And I'm really, really interested in that side of it. But let's see what Peter has on his mind right now.
Yeah, I just had a question. Saul, what's the youngest athlete you work with? Like what age? What